in what is it that you have the right to speak to? Where is your lived experience? Where is your worked experience? And what is it that you would fight for? If you can answer those questions and you can demonstrate and validate, and you can not just deliver 45 minutes on stage, but talk to any question that comes your way and have any conversation that people want to have with you, then you're in the right place. And you do indeed have the right to speak to that very thing. So this is episode 10 of the Speaker Driven Business Podcast, and I am going to get possibly a little bit ranty in this one because this is something that both really pisses me off and breaks my heart. And that is, it's linked to an earlier episode we did about the conversation we need to have about authenticity. And that is this whole move of, come with me, I'll make you an authentic speaker. But when you get into the room, people are trying to make you an authentic speaker in their likeness. The messaging that they know works, the messaging that they found success in, to the market that they made money in the way that they've made money. And the reason why I get really, really, really upset with it, I'm really annoyed with it, is because of the damage it does to the people who are on the other end of that advice when it's not the right advice. So my question to people always is, in the back of my mind, is what I'm actually thinking about when I'm listening to people and we're getting moving and we're starting to bring their core messaging through and working out what structure they should be speaking, all the things we're going to walk you through in this next 20, 30, 40, 50 episodes of Speaker Driven Business. What I'm actually listening for is, do you have the right to speak on this? And I'm not asking it as a challenge and a disruptor and a prove yourself attitude. It's like, I'm listening to understand whether or not this is yours to speak on. And the reason I've come to this is because after 6 or 7 years officially in this space and 15 odd years before that in this space, one of the things I've seen time and time again is people showing up in my rooms exhausted, confused, determined, burnt. And they're burnt and exhausted and confused because of the fact that they have actually, usually by the time they find me, they have already invested in a number of speaking coaches and speaking programs and lots of training, but they've never quite cracked it. And on top of that, to compound it, they've been told that their original driver and their original reason for wanting to speak is not going to cut it. So it's like, for example, one woman that came into one of my rooms, and I was really surprised because I knew some of the people that she had worked with before. And she came to the room and she started talking about what she was going to speak on, which was leadership to corporate. And I'm thinking, that's not how I know you. That's not how you show up in the world. That's not your expertise. Her expertise and genius is actually as an educator, is actually able to build tools in little children for mental health and mental fitness. And so I asked her about what was going on, and she had been advised by every single other expert trainer that she had been paying money to as mentors, as trainers in programs. She had been told that there was no way to make serious money out of that she needed to pivot into leadership and to sell into corporate. Her genius zone was so far removed from that, it was insane. So in that first day of that workshop, that particular program that she was involved in, we actually went where we don't normally on day one. And that was identifying how the market might be found and how she could play in that market. And normally we wouldn't do that so close up, but she was so terrified, had been so convinced that there would be no way for her to make money with the message that's actually in her genius zone, that we had to go there first, because of the bad advice given repeatedly by so-called experts who didn't know any way to make money other than their message, their market, their way. And this is what annoys me. It was such a profound sense of relief for her that on day 2, she walked into the workshop and she threw a dozen, actually probably 24 books on leadership across the boardroom table in the middle. And she invited everyone to take what they wanted because she was never taking them home again. And what those books represented was all the effort she had put into trying to become someone she wasn't, based on the advice of these so-called experts. Right? Now, if somebody knows how to make money their way, that's amazing, but it doesn't mean that they know how to make money your way. And this is why it matters. This is why I go into every conversation when I start working with someone, whether it's in a group program, a workshop, individually, one-on-one. What I'm looking for is, do you have the right to speak on this? We had somebody come into a very recent workshop who actually had the right to speak on this, but the story wasn't appropriate. We've become so bound up in trauma stories and drama stories and trauma bonding almost with audiences that this woman came in to build a keynote presentation or a speaking presentation that would build her business. And she works in a really confronting area. She works in an area that's in mining and heavy industry. She works in the consent space. And she does have her own trauma story, her own lived experience of trauma that would naturally seem to tie into the brand story. And she'd been trying to get it together for 2 years. We were going through the program. We were on day 2. We'd actually shaped that story beautifully, but I just knew it wasn't landing. I knew it wasn't right for this, even though logically everything said that story should be the brand story that would be so powerful. It just wasn't quite right, wasn't quite landing. And I challenged her and I said, I understand that this makes sense, but I believe that this is not the story of origin for your business. And I don't think it should be the story that you're building. Now, she was devastated. She had literally spent the last of her money that she could afford to invest in mentors and coaches coming into that room. And I was telling her that the thing that she'd been trying to build for 2 years, the brand story, was not appropriate. I was also momentarily nervous because I wondered whether I overstepped the mark, especially the way that she walked out of the room that night. When she walked back in the room the next morning, and yes, I did check on her a couple of times during the evening. When she walked back into the room the next morning, she was a different person. She was light, she was bubbly, she was energized. She was like, let's go, let's get this thing done. Let's nail this. I'm ready to bring it home. And I looked at her and said, what happened? She said, you're right. She said, it's not my business story of origin. Yes, it's related to the topic, but it's not the reason I started. And she turned around and she delivered this perfect story of why she had started the business in the first place. And it sang. It had not a hint of trauma bonding in it. It had not a hint of drama in it. And it sang, and it's powerful because it's the most appropriate story for the work that she does, for the market she wants to go into. Okay, so we need to be really, really careful. Another one that comes to mind is a woman who came into our workshops. It was the last live workshop that we had just before we all slammed into COVID. And she was an accountant who also specialized in helping other boutique-size accountancies grow their businesses, be profitable, and get them time back. And she was brilliant at it. She had podcasts around it, programs running, heavy subscription, really, really good at it. She also concurrently, alongside of that, had this incredible lived experience story of overcoming alcoholism and the difference it made in her life. So she was a high-functioning alcoholic, and she did really, really well alongside being a high-functioning alcoholic. She had an incredible lived experience story of coming to terms together and leaving alcohol behind, the transformation that had happened, things like losing, I think it was 60 or 70 kilos in body weight, the mental agility that came back, the clarity that came back when she lost a connection to that addiction. Really powerful story. But again, when we got down to it, it just wasn't coming together. It didn't have the resonance that we look for. And when I spoke to her about what she really wanted to speak about, she felt obligated by other people's response and other people telling her that she should speak on that lived experience story. She felt obligated to do it. So there's a question that I asked her, and I want you to always ask it of yourself. I said to her, okay, out of the two, if we go the lived experience story of breaking the connection to addiction, if we go that story, and you had to speak to it every single day of the year for the rest of your life, could you commit to doing it? If you had to speak to it 364 days a year, because I don't expect you to speak on Christmas Day, could you commit to that? And she was like, no, I couldn't actually. I said, okay, let's flip the script. Let's go to, if you built an incredible keynote around the core drivers that you see on your practice and through the work that you do that creates such a difference for these people, could you, looking at your worked experience story, not your lived experience story, could you speak on that every day for the rest of your life? And she said to me, I would fight for that one. So this is what I'm talking about. Go to the one that you would fight for. Find a way and work with somebody who actually understands that you should speak where you have the right to speak to it. There are so many thought leader programs out there that actually create instant experts, just add water. So they may take a thread of something, but the way that they create your expertise is, and I'm going to actually nominate a particular process that I know about very, very well, and it's go and read 20 executive summaries of books in your space on your topic of choice. Choose the top 6 to 8, read them, distill them, synthesize that knowledge, turn the whole synthesized knowledge into models and IP of your own choice and create a keynote around that. Voila, away you go. And I know that that's powerful and it works, but this is why we quite often have people speaking into spaces that they have no right to speak on, that they don't have the depth of knowledge. You know, you need to speak to what is yours, what you have built, what you have created, what you bring to the table, not listen to the experts telling you, oh, this is the only lane you can make money in. There's an earlier episode in this podcast where we talk about all the different ways that you can make money, and that doesn't even touch the surface from speaking and a speaker-driven business. But you need to actually really think deeply about what do you have the right to speak on? Where should you go? And even if you are moving into play in a different space, that doesn't mean you have the right to speak on it, right? You need to have expertise. You need to have runs on the board. You need to be able to answer questions from the audience and challenges from the people that come and speak to you after you've spoken. You need to be able to go wherever they need to go in the conversations that follow, not just your 45 minutes or 30 minutes or even 20 minutes soundbite on stage. This is not about soundbites on stage. This is not about getting the most commercially lucrative market. This is not about any of those things. This is, where is your zone of genius? Where do you have the right to speak? And the third one, what would you fight for to speak for every single day? If somebody told you you could never speak on this again, what would that be? Now, there are definitely, the qualifier to all of this, there are definitely markets that will never pay you. There are definitely people coming to speak who never want to be paid for the speaking. But being in demand takes the same thing. Being in demand, whether you want to be paid, whether you want to make an impact, whatever your reasons and your drivers are, being in demand, no matter who it is, takes the same craft build and it takes the same foundation. And that foundation is anchored really squarely, nearly swore right then. That foundation is anchored really freaking squarely in what is it that you have the right to speak to? Where is your lived experience? Where is your worked experience? And what is it that you would fight for? If you can answer those questions and you can demonstrate and validate, and you can not just deliver 45 minutes on stage, but talk to any question that comes your way and have any conversation that people want to have with you, then you're in the right place. And you do indeed have the right to speak to that very thing.